on Saturday. Once again, the Director of Public Prosecution stands exposed either as a willing pawn or dangerously ignorant of the law, as he swore to uphold, despite repeated court rulings declaring key sections of the Cyber Crimes Act unconstitutional. Benson Ingonga continues to charge citizens under the same outlawed provisions. Is he being weaponized to silence dissent, or is he simply incorrigible? Either way, this is not prosecution, it's persecution. So that was what was on the headlines of the Standard on Saturday. Then we saw the Sunday Standard, which of course had a different headline. The Sunday Standard's headline yesterday, that was enemy of the press. And it seems as though from the headlines, or rather from the front lines of truth to the machinery of suppression, David Mugonyi, once a fierce journalist chasing stories in the streets of Nairobi, has morphed into the media's greatest foe and President William Ruto's loyal hatchet man, as he's at his beck and call, ready to switch off and curtail media in an act gripping with irony and impunity. The man who once fed off press freedom is now strangling it, ordering illegal TV blackouts and defying court rulings. This fall from his watchdog to enforcer of silence is a cautionary takeover of power and betrayal. Now the journalist turned censor stands accused of dismantling the very freedom that built his career. That was on the headline of the Standard on Sunday. We'll look into this headline for this morning in the Standard. And no thank you. Interestingly enough, we're seeing quotes from different members of the National Police Service. Stella Chirono, who is a police commander at Nyandara County, said, let's not let anger get the better of us. We must learn how to manage our frustrations constructively. William Kiambi is OCBD of Kinangop Nyandaro, and he says, when you see the police, don't run. That's the image we want to build. Even a thief, there is no law that says we catch them, we must kill them. Everyone has rights. Hiram Kimathi, who is a police constable, said, you are a liar. You have lied. You will not protect me. All you will protect are your interests. I will be sacrificed in court before a judge and I will be sentenced to prison. This was on response to what the CS of Interior and National Administration, Chumba Murkomen, said, like, we have your back, the government has your back, we'll take care of you, we'll support you, kind of thing. And he said, no. This is all happening in response to what the CS said, while unfortunately a man police shot is all but dead, reeling from the arrest and prosecution of Nairobi Central Police Station, OCS, and a police constable following the death of Albert Ojwang at the station. Police officers have come out, some boldly, others on condition of anonymity, to rubbish the shoot-to-kill order by Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen. Cases of politicians and senior officers using junior officers to commit crimes and later abandon them to serve jail terms has been cited as police use their colleagues to be guided by the law. A lot to cover in this in these headlines this morning. All of these coming off the Standard in the last couple of days and then into Monday. What other headlines are we looking at in the Standard today? Koinange's 2.4 billion shilling property in Nairobi is to be auctioned. Where? Drug abuse threatens fight to end AIDS deaths and HIV infections, because we know that there's still a lot of using of the same kind of needles. Copet cancels strike push on pledge of talk. So they said, you know what, come, let's talk. So they said, okay, fine. We may not then do this. Isiolo governor's fate in the hands of Senate. Senate will decide if that impeachment is going to uphold or whether they will actually convict. So more or less that's what it looks like in the pages of the Standard this morning. We'll look into more of those stories as we go along. Let's look at some other headlines.
Yes, let's look at the Daily Nation and top the page now. Rival camps imagine ODM as rifts over Ruto alliance widen. Now unity test as splinter groups continue to emerge within former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's ODM party over its association with President Ruto. Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration, with the top leadership pulling in opposite directions. And how senior schools will be categorized now. Secondary schools will transition into senior schools in January 2026, have been grouped based on their ability to offer various career pathways and subject combinations and a competency-based education. So now the old is national schools, but in the pathways now all three that will be cluster 1, and extra county schools will be cluster 2, and county schools will be cluster 3, and sub-county schools will be cluster 4. And there is disquiet in the military, these as soldiers to pay for meals as KDF ends food subsidy plan. Now, military personnel will cater for their own meals starting tomorrow after President Ruto's administration scrapped the food subsidy program for the Kenya Defense Forces. Now, they say they have to pay as you eat. Yes, and there is a lot with junior officers actually saying that will interfere with what they take home.
Did they not pay anything at all, or it was heavily subsidized?
I think it was heavily subsidized.
Okay, so now it essentially goes back to what would be a normal everybody pay for. Oh,
Yes.
wow. That's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, and according to what I've just read, is it's a tradition across the world for military to enjoy such.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know that. That's
Yeah.
why I was asking how come they don't, because I know that. I mean, I just think about stories that my uncle tells, because he's a general, and they get food for almost nothing.
Nothing here.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Interesting. So today we're going to look at the East African. So the paper is June 28th to July 4th. So in between there, kuna story mingi. So among the stories, the main headline, Museveni versus Bobi Wine, a rematch. Another clash of generations, ideology and vision for Uganda's future is in the making as the two rivals lock horns again, with the odds still stacked against the youthful challenger in 2026. Jose Chameleon, I did stupid things, but God gave me a second chance. Now, there's a story in there that's quite interesting. Before I quickly move to the star, the East African Legislative Assembly wants President William Ruto to call an extraordinary heads of state summit to address the cash crisis at the Secretariat that has paralyzed operations and threatens integration. In other words, bunge ina pesa. They want money. And it's because only a few countries have paid their full dues. Only Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania have paid their full dues for the 2024-2025 financial year. Rwanda contributed 75%, Somali 50%, Burundi 19%, Democratic Republic of Congo 14%, and South Sudan only 7%. So they're looking at now the next financial year, 2025-2026, and they're saying we need money and tumechoka kukopa. So partner states have been defaulting on putting some money into that parliament. But if we go to the star, households to take a hit despite soft tax punch. So taxation measures, withholding tax is applied to betting and gaming instead of taxing winnings. The tax will now be charged on withdrawals. The tax rate will be reduced from 20% to 5%. There's excise duty of 20% to be introduced on imported tea, whether flavored or not. Steel and iron are now back to 17.5%. Weren't you told that there are a lot of things that we were tunapiga kelele zilirudi tu? So we were told. Some of these things that we were making noise 75% still managed to sneak in, got in there. Still on the star, mask hawker Boniface Karaoke is brain dead, says family. I don't think I need to go any further from there.
I tell you, looking into details of some of these stories will actually, so we know that, I want to just look into this one, Kidogo.
Which one is that?
This Murkomen story, because then we'll get into it. Murkomen's shoot to kill order backfires as officers return fire over directive. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen's shoot to kill pronouncement has baffled many and drawn widespread condemnation, even from police officers. His remarks came just as what was meant to be a solemn anniversary meant to honor those killed during last year's Gen Z protests turned violent, tragically adding 19 more names to Kenya's growing list of victims of police brutality. The Standard has established that the shoot-to-kill orders by Murkomen for aggressors storming a police station have been interpreted by a section of both senior and junior police officers as a blood-soaked script penned by a playwright who, after handing it to his actors, sits back to watch tragedy unfold, then later insists, "I never meant for anyone to die." Murkomen has since played a familiar script. "I was misquoted." But his remarks seem to have stirred unease within the National Police Service, exposing widespread cracks between command and rank and file officers. In videos that have since gone viral, some police officers have told of Murkomen. One of the officers in one of the videos says, "You are a liar. You have lied. You will not protect me. All of you have protect for your interests. I will be sacrificed in court before a judge, and I will be sentenced to prison." Another spoke to the Standard on condition of anonymity. "It's extremely disappointing to us that this is coming from a CS for Interior who is a lawyer. He knows very well that when things go wrong, the law will be the reference point, and I doubt he'll stand by anyone at that point. If he truly means what he says, why are we not seeing him come through for CS Central OCS Stephen Talam and Constable James Mokwana, who are facing the storm right now? He should start from there so that we believe him." Okay, so I don't know how many times that the picture of video or replay of what somebody says has turned up in the media. Numerous times. And unfortunately, countless and numerous times, the response to those will be what?
Yeah, I was misquoted.
I was misquoted. That is not what I meant. But the thing is, you know what I find? That usually, when somebody says something and then repeats it in the same manner, they mean it. And unfortunately, we have heard this from this year twice in the same number of days. And he repeated it in the same manner, more or less to the same audience. And he sent a message. So I'm confused. And I find myself saying, okay, well, now that he's seen it's a bit sticky, the results of what he said, I am willing myself to find what could be that we've misquoted him on. I'm actually saying, look for this thing that we possibly could have misquoted him on. What is it that we've reported that he didn't say, or that because there is no art to tell the mind's construction on the face, save for saying the word. But, we didn't ask you what you were thinking. These words came from you. So what is it that you said that you did not mean? Did you not mean that if they're walking past the police station? Or did you mean that if they threaten the police officers? But what you said was that if they even walk past a police station, you didn't say whether they were in riots. You didn't say whether it was in a protest. You didn't. So people have taken it to mean that I could walk into a police station in the presence of two of you and I could be shot. I'm really looking for where he didn't mean that. And I can't find it.
I go back to my very popular statement. I think I'm surprised we get shocked by some of these things. Let's back up a bit. When CS Murkomen was outside Rambe office, together with the PS, Raymond, and flanked by top security police officers, if you looked at his demeanor, he was an angry man. He was very upset when he was coming to give that press briefing, where he largely mentioned the Standard for the headlines, and he went all personal. I always say power is wielded in silence. But when you look at his statements right from that press briefing, before going to the streets, he's addressing journalists. He's flanked by all these senior police officers. He was making a lot of statements. He was not reading a script. Now, here's the thing. When you want to really know what is in the mind of someone who represents the government in their docket, don't listen to them when they're reading a script or looking at an auto cue. Go off script. And we've always heard from, politicians when they're reading a script, and then when they finish, they say, "Sasa wacha niseme yangu." From the head of state himself, he will read a script, but when you listen to the language when he's reading the script or looking at the auto cue, it's full of kizungu mingi, I would say, for lack of a better word. But when auto cue kizimwa ama kishafika pale mwisho kwa script imeandikwa the end, they now start speaking. Pay attention at that point. When Murkomen was giving these statements, you know, the thing is, he said this. Let's just quote so that we can unquote.
Yeah.
He said, na tumeambia polisi, mtu yoyote atakaribia police station, piga yeye risasi. Let's just stop right there with that statement. Na tumeambia polisi. The police were around him, including the IG, right? No, Masengeli was there, I think. It was Masengeli who was there.
Masengeli was there.
Yes.
Amin was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, mtu yoyote atakaribia police station, piga yeye risasi. So, how, in that statement alone, what was misquoted?
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. And I've always said, if somebody tells you something to your face, believe them. Short of saying the words. But in this case now, they've said the words. There's no imagery here. There's no confusion. There's no, oh, it's possible that you said what you didn't mean or that you didn't mean what you said. No. And then for the mere fact that you repeated this in another location, you repeated yourself in another location with some of the same people standing there, then come on. I'm telling you this thing, believe what I'm saying. It cannot be that because maybe somebody whispered in his ear later and said, hey man, maybe you've overstepped this thing, and then you come and say, actually, that's not what I meant. For the love of God and all good things. For crying out loud. No.
You see, it's very difficult for anyone to trust that this was a slip of the tongue, because remember, the first time he said that statement, he was actually reprimanded by members of the public, and they actually just shot him down and said, no, sir, no, you can't speak like that. But when he went to a confinement where it was just him and majorly security officers, he repeated the same thing. Now, let's look at what even the president speaking later with regard to that statement. And the president says, yes, the police have to protect themselves and whatnot. So as we sit here today and try to understand how that was a slip of the tongue, I'm sorry, but like we keep saying in the media, like Denny says, you'll read the script fine. But it is at the question and answer where we get our
when
story.
When you put the paper down.
Where we get our story and headlines. So
the story is never in the script.
The script.
Listen, guys. Yeah. Look at this statement in Swahili again. Let me break it down. Na tumeambia polisi. So, in other words, what Murkomen is saying, he's not he's announcing it to the public because he was surrounded by the public.
Yes.
He is speaking to the public. He is not speaking to the police.
Yes.
He is speaking to the public and telling them, na tumeambia polisi, meaning we've had this conversation that anyone who comes near a police station, mtu yoyote atakaribia police station, piga yeye risasi. He did not explain it in context when he's addressing the public. What does that mean, kukaribia police station? Because people can go protest outside the police station and they're not violent. No. So are you then saying anyone who comes near, how near is near?
Exactly.
And then shoot them. Then the thing is this, if you can say this publicly, what do you think they talk about in
closed doors?
Behind with no cameras and no microphones.
That's the scary thing.
Then later on, it's still in that conversation. This is what he said, and this is now what caught my attention. Forget everything else Murkomen was saying, because we're all saying Murkomen said, and he's saying, I was misquoted, I was this. There's something else he said. He said, na hii sio yangu peke yake, ni amri kutoka juu. How else do we misinterpret this?
And then,
he's saying,
unfortunately, it's not just me.
It's not me. I'm not the one saying
it's an order coming from above.
It's an order.
He went on in the same place to say, essentially, that if your gun has 5 or 6 bullets, empty the thing.
Yeah.
Come on. He was extremely graphic in what he was saying. And he went on. A slip of the tongue, guess what? You slip the tongue and then you shut up.
Shut up.
But this was not a slip of the tongue because he went on and on.
You know how he described that gun? Hii bunduki mmepewa, mimi sijapewa, na hamkupewa, ndi ikuwe decoration. This is not a flower. Use it. You have bullets in it. Use it.
That's what we're talking about. We'll have this conversation as we get into 8 o'clock. We'll be talking with lawyer and political party leader, Dr. Ekuru Okot, because to then backpedal on this and say that's not what I meant, then I have to ask, okay, but you really did mean it, and that's what should scare us beyond anything else. Okay, let's look at a couple more stories, shall we, before we come to top of the hour?
The other story here, which is a very sad one, is the story of Boniface Karaoke.
Yeah.
It's difficult to go past this story because we spoke about this that afternoon when he was shot, and the defiance and the demeanor of the police officers who did what they did. And this young man was rushed to Kenyatta National Hospital. And then there were stories that, oh, it wasn't even a serious wound, it was a rubber bullet. And we were here and we spoke about the damage that shot caused.
Yeah.
And it was a very deadly close range wound. And the spokesperson said medics informed the family that Karaoke's brain had stopped functioning. I think it was last week, that coming out of this would actually take a miracle. And what the doctors did, they really, really tried. So when Karaoke was rushed to hospital, he was taken in critical condition. He was placed on life support in the intensive care unit. Surgeons from 8:50 p.m. that night were trying to really work on him. They performed an emergency operation to remove bullet fragments from his head. He remained critical and was put on round-the-clock supervision. Now, Karaoke went again on a second operation, still at KNH. Then, that's June 24th. On June 27th, the third surgery is conducted, and doctors confirmed remaining bullet fragments in his brain, so they couldn't get rid of all the fragments. It wasn't a rubber bullet, guys, and we said it here. Like, we can't create stories out of these kind of situations. It was a live bullet.
Yeah.
And we talked and explained what happened to him. Now, for me, I'm following the chronology of events leading to last Wednesday's protests.
Yes.
And my reading of this situation is simply this. There was a point where the family was told nobody else should be allowed to come visit him because people are going to see him. Of course, that those who would, take pictures, that will only family, very close family members can go in to see him. The thing is this, it's my thinking, it's my opinion. My opinion is Karaoke was long gone before all these announcements were made. And what generally happened, in my opinion, was trying to manage this because it's not just a hospital issue now. It is involving the police. So my assumption is this thing was, don't announce this before the protests. It might flare up a lot of other things because we're still coming fresh from Albert Ojwang's case.
Yeah.
Then Boniface happens. You can't make this kind of announcement and say this is what's happening to him again. So just delay this announcement. This is just my opinion.
Yeah.
Just delay this so that you can manage this crisis and see what can happen. The saddest part of this story is this. When the family came out to speak, what was painful for the family is they were asking for money. They said the bill had accumulated to 3-point-something million.
Yeah.
And they're asking for help. Now, no government official, CS Murkomen has not gone to see the family. Nobody is going to see the family. What we've seen is a government that will send its people, the police, to go inspect buildings, not visit these people who've been murdered or families that have lost loved ones. So we care so much about buildings, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a question of, it's human life, it's empathy. The business owner who's lost his business and whose goods has been stolen, he also needs attention. But so is somebody who is fighting for his life in hospital. Nobody has gone to KNH to see him.
Why don't we hear that, exactly, I mean, that care that we speak about, you don't have to ask. If I keep saying, when somebody tells you with no words something, please believe what it is that they're saying. That if we see on one side where there is, an overt declaration about what you're saying is that we're going to come for you if you threaten us in any way, but the same people have come for and murdered a young man. Before, if you look at what the law says, essentially, because he's still alive, attempted murder essentially would be the charge that would be brought.
Yeah.
But now that he's dead, then now you start to look towards things like manslaughter and murder in terms of a charge. Because he is dead, they're essentially just waiting for nature to take its course. That if the machine will go off at some point, this is what we're being told. Because in Kenya, the laws are that you cannot switch off, even with family consent.
Yes.
Right now. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But if that happens, then the charge would change. What are we seeing with these two gentlemen, with the gentleman who fired that lethal shot? What are we seeing that is happening with them?
Mm-hmm.
Because why do we have such contradictions over and over again? That if we say that, the police will be protected to the hilt, then what happens to those then who are on the other side of the gun? Like Boniface.
Yeah.
What happens to justice? Who's asking the questions, or rather who's answering the questions that so many people have in their minds right now? That, what happens to them? What happens when you now have a situation where any Kenyan is afraid to walk the streets because for fear of what might happen to them with the order that has been given?
You see, at the end of it all, as we even have this discussion, one would just ask a simple question. With everything that is happening, why isn't the leadership just pausing to see we have a problem with how police are conducting themselves and we need to fix this?
Do they, though?
Do
they have a problem,
That's
though?
the question.
Yeah, and I think that should be... Do they actually have a problem with it? Because if they did, I think we would hear something different.
We hear something different. Because at the end of the day, we talk about police brutality from time immemorial. You talk about 1 year ago, talk about 60 bodies that were taken in the hands of police officers and nothing has happened. We're talking about 2025, week 2, and we still see the same stories. And no one is pausing to say, police officers, we need to do things differently. We need to change how we operate with Kenyans. But instead of having that conversation in terms of finding solutions, we are seeing leadership, especially those in interior sectors, saying, you know what, you might as well just go shoot and kill.
Yeah.
Earlier, I'm looking at this story. Earlier reports had indicated that the bullet had been removed. Sergeants later disclosed that fragments of the ammunition remained lodged in his brain, posing a serious challenge to the medical team. Now, according to Anjira, the spokesperson for the family, doctors at Kenyatta National Hospital believe Karaoke may have been shot with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Yes.
Didn't we say it here?
We said it.
Which is a powerful firearm commonly used in hunting, which disperses multiple fragments upon impact. So the first 2 fragments were removed. Mm-hmm. The third fragment still remains in his brain. So doctors reportedly told the family that the remaining fragment could not be extracted immediately, as doing so would pose a significant risk to Karaoke's life. That's why they had to take time, do second and third surgery to try and remove it, but they couldn't. But now here's the thing. What doctors are saying, a person declared brain dead does not recover or wake up. This is according to medical experts. The explanation that brain death is the complete and irreversible cessation of all brain activity. So, with all this, like you're asking, so what happens to the officers who did this? The video evidence from multiple angles is there. It will go through a court process. They too must go through a judicial process, like any other person. But beyond whether they're guilty or not, we know they're guilty, of course, regardless of what happens.
Come on.
The point that you're making is when we have leadership that lacks empathy and humanity, forget the politics. Forget everything. There's a period people are saying President Moi was a bad president, was this, was that. As much as people would say that, there are points when if a tragedy happens somewhere, or if something happens to a school or something, he would show up.
Yeah.
And
not just send a statement.
Not sending a statement. You are present. The thing is this. If you can go and inspect buildings, it's fine. These buildings have been affected by goons who are part of the protest, yes. If you have time to walk around the city, go inspect buildings. How about also sparing some time, an afternoon, go to these families, sit with them, go to Kenyatta National Hospital, even if it is to fake it, even if it's a PR
just
exercise.
for optics.
For optics, just show up, just tell this family, I'm sorry. You may not be responsible, but you are the leader. So you're saying you are there, you're present with the family. Look, what the bill is, as of yesterday, 3.3 million. Now, every day that is on that machine, it's 180,000 every day.
Okay.
The father is a hawker. Boniface was a hawker. They don't have this kind of money. And they are pleading to the public for money. They've even moved away from, we don't expect to get him back, but we have a bill here. Now
we
they're
need to
troubled
sort
and
it
worried
out.
about paying a bill.
And you see, the law stops you from switching that machine.
There we
So
go.
what are we talking about?
Absolutely. Those are the conversations that we have this morning. Boniface Mwangi in the hot seat at 7. It's actually a minute past 7. Good morning.